With that being said, hey guys, this is Altovise Pelzer hosting What the Speakeasy podcast, where we go behind the scenes and give you the story on what it is to be the successfully paid speaker and author. I'm your host, Altovise Pelzer, that part, founder of the World Voice League, podcaster, award winning speaker, and author. And this particular episode is really near and dear to my heart because you guys know that for me, I just published book number 14, and most of my stories and even the platforms that I've been able to create have all come from me seeing a struggle in some area of my life or the lives of those around me and me deciding that I wanted to change something. So I was listening to the interview that author John Green did, and he is the author of Fault in Our Stars. I don't know if you've heard of the book. I don't know if you've read the book. Definitely an amazing read. I'm sure of it. I know that I've seen the movie. I have teenagers; they loved it. Well, teenage girls. I don't know if my son loved it per se. You know how that goes. But it was definitely a great story and one that kind of took us away from the norm when it comes to the movies that were coming out at the moment, because we were dealing with a lot of superhero movies and all of these other ones. So this particular story definitely took you out of the norm for what people were used to when it came to uh, a movie. I love, 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 love the stories. I love the conversations, and I just wanted to talk about some of the things that he pointed out in his interview that really stood out. And the number one thing that really stood out was which was what I made the topic for today was um, the fact that you're turning your struggle into a strength. And when you decide that you're going to write a book, that's what you're doing. I've been getting a lot of feedback. We just recently published through World Voice League, we just recently published a book called A Stage of Their Own, where 13 authors were coming together to tell their story of what it meant to create their movement that they're looking to create or that they have created. And that's what it was ultimately in a nutshell. It was turning struggle into a strength. It was looking at what somebody said to you. It was looking at what somebody did to you. It was looking at the ways that you thought the world were going to work, things were going to work in your favor. The world was going to work things out. And in reality, it didn't. It got difficult. It got hard. Some people didn't have the strength to get up from day to day. It was like literally a daily process just to get up out of the bed. And so when I think about Fault in Our Stars, and I think about what the author John Green was talking about when he said that you're turning your struggle into a strength, I can relate to that. Now, not everybody can relate to that. Some people have not been able to turn their struggle into a strength. Some people are still in the struggle. Can be honest about it. Some people are still in the struggle. Some people are still in that mindset of trying to figure it out. But this is why it's so important for us to write our story. This is why it's so important for us to tell our story, because now if someone else is going through that same struggle, they see what we've been through, they can model the strength or at least see that somebody was able to make it out on the other side. Like, you become the inspiration for millions of people. You become the inspiration for that. Heck, even if only one person. This is one of those things where, some people write the book to make because they think they're going to make a whole lot of money, and other people write the book because they have a story to tell and they're trying to make an impact. This is those who are trying to make the impact. And so when I'm trying to make an impact, what ends up happening is I'm looking and I'm saying, if just one person reads this book and it changes their life and they're able to move forward out of whatever situation they're in, that changes the game. That shift is everything. That means that, what once was something so dark, once was something so draining, can now be something of a light to somebody else. And so when he was talking about it, he was talking about how um, Fault in Our Stars was kind of like a letter to his younger self. And it was interesting because I always thought about, how in high school, I don't know if you went through this in high school, but in high school, I remember one of our teachers asking us to write a letter to our older self. Hey, you know, think about this, keep dreaming, keep going, push harder, something, something. I don't even remember if I wrote the letter. Don't judge me. But I don't even remember if I wrote the letter, let alone um, what I would have put into the letter, simply because just me being me. But imagine if right now you wrote a letter to your 18-year-old self. If right now you wrote a letter to your 80-year-old self, what would that letter say? And ultimately, when you are writing a book, that's what you're doing. You're writing a letter to one person. You're writing a letter to that individual. And I know that sometimes we get a little carried away because, again, people think about the money and, oh, you should be doing this with it and you should be doing that. But the reality is when I'm writing a book, or even when I'm just writing a chapter for another book, anthology, I'm writing a letter to someone. And it can be my former self, it can be my later self, it can be somebody that's not even me, it can be my future grandchildren, it can be a good girlfriend, it can be, I mean, anything. But when you're writing that book, that's what it feels like, is I'm writing this letter to you. Now, me personally, there are certain things that I implement when I'm writing that other people probably would kind of find weird. Um, but everybody, it's like to each its own. Everybody will have their own little quirks and techniques when it comes to writing your story. But I can tell you for definite that your story needs to be told. There is something within your story that needs to be shared. And so, one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode, because, like I said, after listening to John Green's interview, it just made me smile because I've been getting feedback from people who have started reading the book that we just published, which was an anthology. And the message was, oh my goodness, everybody's story was so powerful. The message was, oh my goodness, this was such an inspiration to me. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you for creating this platform. Thank you for doing this. And it made me go back and say, wow, there are many more that still need to tell their story. And if it's in an anthology, if it's in your own book, there's something that you need to be putting on paper and presenting it out to the world. And, one of the things that's often said is that the graveyard is the richest place in the world, simply because there's so many creative ideas and information that went to the grave with many of our ancestors, grandparents, great grandparents. And, for me personally, I have like photo albums and stories that I can share with my children about my great grandparents. Now, before them, it gets a little murky, but my grandparents and great grandparents, I can share so many different great stories from them and show them the documentation. Um, Many people, your legacy is being lost because there is no documentation. And I think a lot of times the things that we endure as people, the things that we endure as a society, are really connected to the fact that there are those who went before us and endured the exact same things, and they never wrote it down. Out of fear, they never wrote it down. Out of complacency, they never wrote it down. And so here it is. We are years in the future now. And guess what? We need the information that they would have left us, but we don't have it. And it's kind of sad because, we talk about wanting to do what's best for our children. Well, have you written out the things that you wanted to share with your children? Have you written out the stories? Have you told them the stories? Many have not. And so I challenge you, if you're listening to this particular episode, I challenge you to do two things. I challenge you to not only take on this challenge that I'm about to give for yourself, I challenge you to share it with somebody else so they can take on this challenge as well. It's time out for us thinking that our story does not need to be told. I think a lot of what we are going through, again, in our communities, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, in our families, can be directly aligned with the fact that there have been those who have gone through the same thing in the past and never left instructions. Think about it. It's like a good recipe. When you have a grandparent that has a great recipe, don't you want to know that recipe? Don't you want to sit down and learn it? Don't you want to watch them peel the peaches? I don't know if you peel peaches. I think you just cut peaches, but you get what I'm saying. Peel the apples to make a strudel or making some peach cobbler. I think about my godmother's mom, and I used to call her grandmother, and she would make a peach cobbler. That's out of this world. I've never made a peach cobbler, and I'm scared that I would jack it up. But I would have loved to have been able to say, even though she wasn't my blood grandmother, she wasn't related by blood, I would have loved to be able to say to my children, this is a recipe that was handed down. Look at how that feels. You feel pride in the things that can be handed down from generation to generation. So the challenge was, don't just take this challenge for yourself, but to challenge somebody else to do it with you. Write a letter to yourself. Write a letter to your younger self. Write a letter to your older self. What would you tell you? If you were writing a letter to your 65-year-old self, what would you say? Now, I know the age range, like, kind of, for this particular podcast, the age kind of ranges. So, some of you may say, well, I'm already 65. I'm already 65. So then what would be the letter that you write to your 18-year-old self? What would be the letter that you wrote to yourself in college? What would be the letter that you wrote to yourself when you got married? Oh, that's a good one. And I know there's going to be people that tell you right now, listen, that of course, it's always got to be about the money. I get that. I understand. But can we do something about the impact? Let's make an impact. Write a letter to your married self. We're going to change some generational stuff, okay? Write a letter to yourself on your wedding day and give it to your granddaughter when she gets married. Oh my goodness, could you imagine the traditions that would be started? Could you imagine the impact that would make? To know all the wisdom that you had from your wedding day, the stress, because listen, let's be honest, wedding days are not our friend. There are a lot that goes on. But if you wrote that letter to her on her wedding day, you handed it to your granddaughter on her wedding day, and she handed it to her daughter on her wedding day, imagine just the impact that it could make. Man, imagine the things that you could stop her from doing or stop her from feeling on that day simply because she had the opportunity to read that letter. And then it goes a little deeper. Because then you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to tell my story. Well, my story is maybe you were bullied in high school. I know John talks about, um, being bullied when he was younger. He talks about rejection. He talks about rejection a lot. And rejection, while he was in a program for writing, he talks about the advanced program rejecting him. And, a lot of times we won't continue to write the story because of that rejection, right? What if you wrote a letter to yourself in that moment? What you learned now that you're past the rejection, what you learned now that you're past the divorce, what you learned now that you're past that moment, what would you tell yourself? What would be the conversation you have? And I can guarantee that even if that conversation is not one that doesn't have to be a long conversation, it doesn't have to be a long one, but just what would you say to you? When I think about the changes I made in 2016 to get to where I am now, when I look at the changes I made in 2019 to get to where I am now, I would go back because there's always fear when you're about to change, right? I would go back and tell myself, it's always going to be fear. Just go. There's always going to be some type of fear. Just jump. Stop holding back. Stop second guessing yourself. Just jump. There's always going to be people that ridicule you or think that you don't fit in. Just jump. Go. Because I guarantee you that you'll have a whole lot more to live for after you jump and on that journey down than if you just would stay on the bridge. That's powerful, right? There's so much more for you to enjoy on the journey down than if you're just standing on that bridge. So when we decide that we're just going to go, we're going to jump and take that leap, it takes us to a whole nother level. So no matter what your story is, there's someone that needs to hear it. There's somebody that it can impact. There's somebody that it can literally be the wind beneath their wings. I'm not going to sing for y'all. I'm not going to do that to y'all. But it goes a long way. And even the rejection, even the fear. I mean, so many different things, guys, right? So then I often hear the story of people saying, well, the market is saturated. There's millions, there's all of these books on Amazon. And why am I going to write a book? Because there's somebody waiting for your story. We did an anthology we just did an anthology called A Stage of Their Own. It brought together 13 authors to tell their story of really um, taking that one thing and creating a movement from that one thing, that pivotal moment in their life. And we're working on the next anthology, and the next anthology is, talking about that big jump, that big step that really puts you in a position to shift some things and reach success in your life. And so many people have already started reaching out saying, I want to be a part of this next anthology. I wish I would have been a part of the first one, but I'm not missing the second one. Let's go. I want to be a part of it, because we have to have the understanding that our story is valuable. I used to tell the story of how in one of my classes, we we would say churros. I am churros. And it's because when you look at the history of churros, which y'all know is the dough with the cinnamon and uh, the dough stick, I should say, with cinnamon. And if you look at the history of churros, nobody knows where it came from. It's claimed by several different areas, several different people, but nobody knows where it came from. And I said, a lot of times we're trying so hard to build um, We're trying so hard to build something so people can know who we are because we think that we have to come from something. We have to overcome these great feats. We have to be this amazing person. We have to come makeup on and hair done. And we have to come and be like pristine. We got to come in like we Kim Kardashian out of here. And but the thing about it is that people just want you. When they hear your story, they want your story. They just want you. And we get so caught up in trying to have this facade and trying to have this image. And even when we think about it, everybody's talking about branding and it's your brand and you are your brand and all these different things. And that's great. But people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Having the brand can be great. And we even saw that in a young lady who she tried to launch a t-shirt brand, and she's an influencer that tried to launch a t-shirt brand and got absolutely no, only got a couple sales. I think she needed like 25 sales and she didn't even get 25. I get that. I get what it is to be in a position where you see everybody else using a technique and they're finding success in the technique, or maybe they aren't because not everybody's truthful, but they're doing a technique and you think that you need to do it as well. And I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try this and I'm going to go ahead and I'm try that. And those of you that follow my story know that I tell everybody that in 2016, I was trying to follow, somebody's technique, people's technique, and launched 3 classes and got absolutely nobody in the class. And I got feedback after the fact, but nobody signed up for the class. And it wasn't until I decided to do my own thing that I started getting feedback and I started getting people joining classes and people joining things. But it wasn't until I did my own thing. We can't always follow the masses. So you may write a book and it's a small book. It may be something that you just share in doing small talks or something that you hand out at local colleges or universities and local high schools. Start where you are, but your story is needed. There's something within your story that can spark something for somebody else. It's necessary, but you won't know how much it's needed until you actually put it out there. Many people take their story to the grave. And I believe, like I said, that we are in the position we are in right now because many people have taken their story right to the grave with them. And it's needed, it's necessary. So he talks about the rejection. We're talking about John Green. He talks about the rejection from the advanced writing class at Kenport. And it's interesting because I can tell you from personal experience, rejection puts you in a position to evaluate where you are, who you are, and what it is you really want to do. And you may not get anything from any other part of this episode, but I really want you to get it. I want you to hone in on this. Rejection puts you in a position to reevaluate where you are, who you are, and what you are trying to do. I've had it happen. I've had people have whole groups of people reject me and block me. And I often go back and say, as an introvert, I am somebody who I am always evaluating what I say. I'm always somebody who evaluates what I do. That's just me. But I always go back and say, was there a way to handle it better? Was there a different conversation that needed to be had? I always look at self first. You always do that self-evaluation first. Was it me? And one of the things that I have learned in that moment of rejection is that you can't let it stay past the moment. You can't let it stay past the moment. It needs to be there. You have that moment of evaluating where you are, what you're doing, what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go. Have that moment of evaluation and allow that moment to move past. Because somebody's rejection of you has nothing to do with you. Somebody's rejection of you has nothing to do with you. And I'm going to tell you why. Because even if you apologize, there's something on their end that still needs to be done. Even if you have a conversation, there's something on their end that needs to be done. Their rejection of you is a reflection of them, not you. And so you always have to go back and say, I can't allow this to stay more than a moment because their rejection of me does not define me. That's why you have that moment. That's why you had that woosah, that look, check your own shanana and see what's going on. That's why you take that moment. But when you take that moment, then you move past that moment. Because their rejection of you has nothing to do with you. And I learned that the hard way. In 2016, I tell the story about how I went and I was working with a coach, and she, I had taken classes with her. I had actually gotten some certification through her program, and I'm supportive. I'm always supportive of everybody. That's just me. And man, it had gotten it had gotten a little busy, doing a couple different things, moving, shaking. Other people wanted me to do events, and they wanted me to do interviews and all these things. I'm launching the podcast, I'm launching books. Man, it was a lot going on, but I was still remaining supportive. And out of the blue, I just found out that everybody blocked me. And it's funny because when it happened again from someone else, I wasn't fazed by it, but it made me go back to that moment and say, yeah, I cannot I can't change how you feel about you. I can't change how you feel about what you do. I only have power over me. And that's a big step for us to think about. And I think that comes from a lot of the writing that I've done and reflection I've been able to do. But in this moment, everybody blocked me. I didn't know. I didn't do anything. Like literally, I did absolutely nothing. I knew nothing what was going on. I didn't even know I was blocked. And I was cracking up because I was like, what in the world? Somebody else had to tell me I was blocked. And the same thing happened again this year with somebody else. And somebody had, it just like happened that I saw. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. But it was interesting because it took time, but in time, those same some of those people came back and apologized, and they said, we found out it wasn't you. You didn't do anything. It wasn't. And we have to think about that when we go through rejection. Rejection is not, it's not, we take that moment to see if there was something we could have done. We forgive ourselves for anything that we did not do or that we did do that was out of context. But the rejection is not about you. The rejection is about that person and whatever they're going through and whatever they're feeling. But that's a part of the story that needs to be said. And I think not enough people talk about, what rejection feels like, and the fact that rejection is not for you. The fact that forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for you, so you can walk forward and be okay. and not hold a grudge. It's for you. It's not for them. So we have to kind of, shift the paradigm on what forgiveness is and what rejection is and all these other things. And it only comes about from you telling your story. So me telling that story, other people that have had similar situations happen, they've really been able to be like, oh, wow, okay, you're right. It wasn't really about me. It was about whatever they were going through. And that's okay. I can't take it personal. I had to figure out what I needed to do. If there was an apology I needed to do in the moment, I do the apology, and then you got to just move forward. But if I didn't say that, then how many people would go around thinking that the rejection was about them? How many people would go around thinking that you couldn't be in their circle because of something you did? Many. And this may only go out to 100 people. This may only go out to 10 people. But those 10 people will understand that the rejection was not about them. That's what turning your struggle into strength means. It's because if something else happens, if somebody else rejects me, I'm not looking for validation from them. I'm not looking for support I'm not looking for anything. I look at me, I do that inward look, see what's going on, and move forward. It's valuable. And so, in turn, that was a struggle for me when it first happened because, again, I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. But it allows you to grow. And I'm so thankful for growth. That's that part, right? We all got to be thankful for growth. As podcasters, as um, authors, as speakers, as entrepreneurs, as even employees, we have to understand that everybody's going to have a different dynamic, but there's somebody that resonates with your story. There's somebody who literally will cling on to your story and hold on to it as they're going through some of the toughest times in their life. Your story will be the lit candle that guides them through darkness. Your story will be the breath of fresh air as they're going through a toxic situation. Like your story has the potential to be so much. How much longer will you wait to tell your story? So, of course, this episode was the only episode I've ever given you homework. So, yeah, you thought I forgot. Make sure you write that letter. Write that letter. Tag us on Facebook, hashtag World Voice League, hashtag Speak Easy Podcast. Tag us. We want to know. Write that letter. And if you're scared to write the letter, write it and hide it. Go ahead. You'll find it one day. And it'll probably be just when you need it. I guarantee it. It'll be just when you need that letter that you will find it. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys. Don't forget, those of you who may be interested in joining us up for the next anthology, bit.ly/MOTF author. That's bit.ly/MOTF author. bit.ly/MOTF author. We would love to have your story be shared. In this particular anthology, again, it's about taking a big step in order for you to see success. What was that big step that you had to take? And man, I already had people who were like, I'm ready to tell this story. I got something for this book. So I'm looking forward to it. This anthology will be out later on this year. So yeah, that means that'll be book number 4. That will be book number 4 that will be published this year. That will be book number 15 total for books. Yeah. Man, crazy, right? I'm super excited, you guys. I'm looking forward to hearing these letters, or even if I don't hear them, even, you know what, I'll put it out there because some of you may say, I want to write the letter, but I don't really want to share it online. By all means, I would love to read the letter. I would love to read it. You can email it to us at contacts@altovisepelzer.com. Email it to us. We'll read it and, give you some feedback on it, or, just give you some kudos for at least doing the task. Because I know a lot of times it is very hard to write about what you've been through, or um, sometimes it's a trigger for some people. When they start writing about it, they become emotional and crying. So definitely make sure that you give yourself some time and some space to do that. But with that being said, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for those who are in the Speak Easy podcast audience today. I appreciate y'all, because without the Speak Easy podcast audience, there is no Speak Easy podcast. That part. Not just that, guys. Altovise Pelzer here, your host, the voice coach, founder of the World Voice League. Guys, we have so many things and opportunities for you. Not just that, we want to know how this particular episode resonated with you. You guys know that we are now over on Apple Podcasts. It's no longer iTunes, but I want to get some feedback from you guys, even if you just leave it on whatever platform you're listening to us on. We would love to know how this particular episode resonated with you. If it didn't, it made you feel a little fuzzy on the inside, we want to know those things. Not just that, make sure that you're connecting with somebody else and sharing this out, because they may need this information as well. So guys, until next time, don't forget to press it out. See ya.